Hello world, it is Wednesday, July 6, 2022, and looking out the window at Defiance, it's kind of a stormy morning. It was very warm and humid, 69 degrees this morning at about 6:30, and really humid, and then it started raining, so it tells you, as I understand it, it's going to be most of the morning that way too. Some chance of thunderstorms for the next few hours anyway. Rain we needed. I'm not going to complain. The devotion for today is entitled Through Our Fears by Kaji Dosha. Kaji bases it on the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 25, some adapted verses out of that selection. I won't believe this is true until I can see the nail marks in his hands and I can put my hand in his side. And Kaji writes, Thomas set up an impossible condition for his belief. Jesus wasn't into people touching him without his consent. He was clear about his bodily autonomy, but Thomas said, I will not believe unless. I think this is an impossible condition, the least likely scenario, given how Jesus wasn't into people touching him like that. Was Thomas's way of avoiding the pain of failure, of being wrong. The idea of God not having followed through. That was just too much. And what makes me think this? The text doesn't spell this out, but I'm confident of this because our wiring hasn't changed. We've been like this since the caves and woolly mammoths. We live by our fears because we are wired to believe this is the best way to protect ourselves. Thomas thought by setting up something so clearly impossible, he could outmaneuver his fears. But that which is impossible in our imaginations is very much possible for God. Jesus showed up for Thomas in precisely the way Thomas needed in order to overcome his fears. We talk so much about living in faith, as if it's the opposite of fear. But faith is a companion of fear. I think faith is God's act of grace to overcome our fears again and again so that we can live more closely aligned with God's promises and priorities. Living as God intends us is very much in our best interests. Then why do so many of us struggle to pull it off? Because everything in here, in this brain of ours, tells us that change is terrifying. The familiar is to us like a pig in slop. We just roll in it, even though we know let's call it slop. And we'd rather roll in slop because it's more familiar than be cleansed by the waters. But you know what? God knows how to meet us in our fears and carry us through them. In Kaji's prayer. God, thank you for meeting me right here, right now. Let's get through this together. Amen. Well, one of the things this devotion made me think about is change and how frightened we are of change. And I'm not really sure why, because so many times when we resist change and something happens and we get through it and we actually find out it's good. So I'm not sure where this human resistance to change. And I think the church is in a position where it has to change. It can't keep doing what it's always been doing and expect a different result. And for me personally, what I think the church has to do is to become more involved in living and in life, in everyday life. So people can see a direct correlation between going to church on Sunday and living their life every other day of the week. And having the church has to find ways to help people live their faith each and every day, each and every moment. It's not a separate activity. It's not an event for getting together with your friends, although it can be. Community building is part of what church is, but that's not its sole purpose. Its real purpose is to steep us in the teachings of Jesus and the love of God, so that we can go out into the world and be God's hands and feet, Jesus' hands and feet, living and loving just as Jesus did, embodying God in our lives just as Jesus did. That's a lot to think about in one devotion. It is Wednesday, so I hope to see you again tomorrow.